Famous author George Orwell once wrote, "Every generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it, and wiser than the one that comes after it." Is that still true today? Well, I'm going to ask four sisters who span the gamut from millennial to Generation Z about that idea and about how they view faith. This is Real with Reed, safe, honest, constructive place to have conversations about faith from different perspectives. And episode 5 starts right now. Well, hey, everyone, and welcome. Thanks, ladies, for joining me on this episode of Real with Reed. And I'm going to let you guys do your own introductions. So maybe Katie, the elder sister, goes first. And then you guys just give a little introduction, and particularly maybe what year you were born in, because we span about 8 or 9, 10 years here. So anyway, go ahead.
All right, so I'm Katie Stevenson. I was born in 1991, grew up in Westminster, Maryland, and now live outside of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Great. Ray?
I guess I'll go next. I'm Rachel Fletcher. I was born in 1993. Also grew up in Westminster, Maryland, and currently live outside of Richmond, Virginia.
And I am Juliana Howard. I was born in 1998, and I also grew up in Westminster, Maryland, and I just graduated from University of Maryland, College Park.
And last but not least, I'm Abby Howard. I also grew up in Westminster, Maryland. I was born in 1999, and I will be a senior at Messiah College.
There you go. And so what you may not know by listening or watching us today is that these four are all sisters. And I have known their family for a long time, and I'm so excited that I got all of you on one interview. This is going to be fun as we talk about faith from a generational perspective. And you guys go from clearly, Katie, millennial, down to Abby, you're a Gen Zer. I don't know if that's a good thing or you identify as that or not. We'll find out here in a minute. But you also have, all four of you have really unique faith experiences. And we're going to get into that a little bit today. But let's start. We'll go the other way around. Abby, you start. Just a little bit of your faith story. Talk about how faith became real and personal to you.
Yeah. I've actually had a lot of opportunities to share my story, I feel like, because just of my involvement in Young Life. And like whenever you are involved in Young Life, it's kind of the, I don't want to say expectation, but it's you share your story, and it's kind of like my first experiences of being willing to, I feel like, figure out what my story is and then share it with other people. And so I remember in high school when I first shared my story, it was just kind of like, I didn't really know what it was because we grew up in such a solid home, and like mom and dad just led us so strongly. Like, I think that it was just, that was the way that they led us. And I was the youngest, and I had 3 amazing older sisters. And so I just followed. And so I think in high school, I definitely just had some experiences of just trying to figure it out on my own and trying to choose things that I thought were life-giving at the time. And obviously ended up not being life-giving at the time. And I do think that me being in Generation Z, is that what I'm in?
Yeah.
Generation Z. And I think just social media has like a huge, huge impact on that generation specifically, like not just now for all generations, but like I grew up with social media, and in high school, I think majority of my, insecurities and then just shortcomings and falls and just like straying away, like were directly linked to social media. And being able to kind of walk through that, like it's not something that you can just yes, you can delete your account, sure, but you can't just like sign off of the face of the earth. Like you're literally like assigned, you can Google your name and like something comes up, and that is kind of like haunting a little bit. But definitely when I went to college, it was kind of like I was separated from my family for the first time, and I had to really make decisions on my own. And I think a lot of girls my age, and I guess boys too, can say, like, when you go away to school and you become independent, you can really choose whether that's what you want to pursue, like if your faith is something that you want to pursue, because you can go either way. And
Sure.
yes, I went to a Christian college, but it's still a college. And yeah,
It's
so I
still a
think
college.
definitely, yeah. And I can talk more about that later because I have many opinions about that. But I think the summer before my freshman year was really pivotal in just my wanting to choose life and wanting to choose just truth and to be truthful. And I think that honesty and vulnerability and transparency is probably like the biggest struggle for me. Not honesty, just being like vulnerable, I think, and being willing to share. And yeah, so that was probably very like surfacey, probably because I don't like going to those deep places.
We'll dig a little deeper here in a little bit. But no, I appreciate that. Yeah, Jules.
Yeah, this question is always really funny to me because I think for a long time, whenever someone asks, like, what's your testimony? What's your story? There's this assumption that there's like a time before Christ, there's the encounter, and then there's the time after Christ. And I think all of us can attest to, we were raised just with really great parents, that everything was motivated by the gospel. And we had such a great home to be brought up in, and that I always felt really insecure that I had such a boring testimony. And then I think as I got older, I started to learn of like what a gift that was, that I have a boring testimony and I can rejoice in that. But I definitely think, like, along with Abby, there was just this like process of realizing who I am because of Christ. I think that in college is definitely also like when I started to come to terms with, okay, so it's not my parents' faith. It's not my older sister's faith either. It's my faith. And so what does that mean for me? And I think in college, the biggest thing that I learned was that I was so concerned with what the Lord was doing and what he was going to do either to me or for me, instead of really learning to love who he is. And so I think in college too, there was this really big realization. I was like reading through John, I think for the first time. I think I realized that like throughout my whole life, I was really bad at reading the Bible. And I just had, because we had so many books in our house, which was great.
At reading the Bible.
I definitely was. Like I like knew your keystone Bible verses that like we had to memorize stuff all the time, because Abby and I were homeschooled. And so I like knew the Bible, but I
there it is.
had to throw it in.
I just think it's funny that like, well, we had to memorize scripture, but because we were homeschooled.
Yeah, well, that is what happened. But I think I started, like, I read through John for the first time, like, with a more mature mind, I guess. And I think just the first verse of like, if in the beginning was the Word and the Word was with God and the Word was God, I can't really say that I love God without also loving his word. And so I think a big part of my testimony and my story has been realigning my life and my thoughts and who myself, through the lens of who Jesus and who God is, and what he says in his word, and not just what he's going to either do to punish me or bless me. And that my main concern has to be with who the Lord is first. And so that's my boring testimony, but I'm really grateful for it and really proud of it too.
We weren't bored. We were on the edge of our seats, Jules. All right, Rachel.
So yeah, I feel like we've established that we grew up in a Christian home, and not just like a culturally Christian home, but with parents who really loved us and loved the Lord. And then Katie and I also grew up with another set of parents, where it was also a great home environment, but very different. It wasn't based on kind of a central faith. So early on, I kind of got to see the difference just practically of like what a life with the Lord looks like and what a life without the Lord looks like, which gave me just knowledge and appreciation just insight into both. But just like the girl said, I think there was never a point where, I mean, Mom would say it was in kindergarten, and Katie and I went to a Christian school. And there was like a day where they taught us about like caterpillars and butterflies and like new life in Christ or something.
For sure.
And so I think she says that on Christian birthday. I don't recall that, so I don't know. But I do remember being like very concerned with not salvation, but like I remember thinking like, I wonder if it's stuck. Like praying, like, do I have to pray the prayer again? But growing up in half of the time in a Christian home and also in a Christian school, it was easy, I feel like, to follow the Lord. It didn't, even though I saw kind of an alternative in my daily life, it didn't really feel like there was an alternative for me. And then I think when we got to high school and started being involved in life, but also leading wildlife, there became more opportunities for like practically serving the Lord. And like, what does it look like to not have like faith be just a part of your internal identity, but like the external way that you exist in the world. And through that, I think I was processing a lot of stuff just about, I think I'm an Enneagram 4, and my thing both and in my like personal family story is just the feeling of being like not chosen and not I just never felt like I was anyone's first choice. So I think, and that's maybe not because of anything anyone did, but that's just kind of the identity I took on. And having close sisters can, I think, feed into that. Katie and I are really close in age, and so I would think we probably both felt that way because of each other sometimes. And then going into college, I remember this is so like moody, artsy fartsy, but I was like walking to a theater like rehearsal. I was in this director's fest where like student directors put on plays, and I auditioned for one of the plays, and I think it's the last theater thing I ever did. But I was walking there, and there's this big rock on the quad at JMU where Katie and I both went. And I remember being so frustrated with the Lord because I was like, I'm not anything to anyone. I'm not anything to you. And if you don't care about me, like, why would I live my life with you in it? And so for like a week, I tried to just not. And then I couldn't because I think for some people, they look to like nature and they're like, oh, God is so clearly expressed through nature. And some people, they have specific life experiences or scripture or something. But for me, I think I just like feel the Lord so indelibly inside of myself and in the way that he is real to me and the way he shows up for me. And so I think that week of being like, I don't know if I want to do this, just showed me how like, no, this is what I was created for, and like the life inside of me, and I can't extricate myself from that. And so from then it's just been seasons of having very practical faith, like leading Young Life, and a lot of opportunities for kind of big faith stuff. And then with motherhood, it's a lot quieter. And
really, that's not a word that I thought you would use about motherhood. A lot quieter.
Oh, motherhood isn't quieter.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, like faith and motherhood is not the same.
Yeah,
like young red-blooded faith where you're like, what do I do? Give me the next like mission field.
Well, let's come back to that, because you also married someone who was from a family of pastors, and you're very connected with the church. So I want to come back to that and hear your perspective on that. Katie, you're last, and then I'm going to ask you about the church that you're a part of now. So at the end of your faith story, I want to hear what your faith is doing right now. So go ahead, Katie.
Sure. So similarly, like I feel like there was never a key moment of this is what I can pinpoint as when I started believing, but I think gradually, like I would use the word gradual, my faith built gradually over years and years. I do think that for most of my like childhood and teenage years, I had a very performance-based view of faith, like, and not necessarily, I don't think I really knew any better. I think that I just thought like, okay, well, what you're supposed to do when you love God is like read your Bible or not do these things. And so that's kind of how I operated. And then I think when I went away to college, similarly, like you're faced with that. Is this what I'm going to choose for myself? Or is this what I just am comfortable with because it's what I've known? And so I think in college, through some like hard situations, was really when I learned about grace and just the idea that like relationship with God is not something I can earn, and approval from other people or from God is not something I can ever do enough to earn. And so I think that actually was the beginning of a lot of freedom for me, like freedom from other people's expectations, from anger that I had built up, from resentment, from comparison, from a lot of that. And so the years since then, I've been out of college for a little while now, have really been a continued learning of shedding away of things that are not true and are not the gospel, and embracing that, like, that any amount of faith or life or freedom now is only found in the work that Jesus accomplished on the cross and is not achievable by me, which is something I have to remember frequently. So,
yeah,
because I'm just a doer by nature. Mm-hmm. So recently, that was college. And then after college, I moved to Saranac Lake, New York, and worked at a Young Life camp there for a few years. I got married, and then about like 5 years ago, moved to the Cincinnati area and was a part of a church for a while there. And then about, I guess, probably a year and a half ago, we were sent out by that church, a group of us, to start a new church in a city called Lebanon. And so that's kind of where we're at now. And that was not something I ever anticipated doing or really had a huge desire to do. It was more, I think, through prayer and time with the Lord, my husband and I both felt just that something new was coming, and we learned about this opportunity and really felt like that was kind of what the Lord had next for us. So we fixed up our house, sold it, packed up our bags, and are currently trying to love and serve people here in Lebanon. So
okay, those are all great stories and fun for people to hear. They get a little sense of who you are. But Kate, I'm going to start with you. So most churches are led by people of a different generation than any of you. And how do you think that affects your perspective of church, your role in church, or even people of your generation, how they view the church? Because it typically is led by people of an older generation. Katie, how has that played itself out in your church? I don't even know the age demographic of your church, but how's that played itself out?
Yeah, we have had the privilege of attending several churches now that really have a wide variety of ages, which I feel like is so important. And also, I believe, like, how church was designed to be done, with lots of different people in different age groups and different family styles. So our church now also has a variety of ages. And I think for people in our generation, it begs that same question that we all discussed in going away to college. It's like, are you going to choose to leave that for older people? You know, are you going to choose to decide like, well, that's their job, and I get to be like a consumer of church right now because I'm not in this, you know, I'm not going to be leading, you know, or, you know, be a pastor right now when I'm 22 or whatever age, you know. But I think it asks that question, like, that does not have to be the way that things are. And so I think for us, it has been good to figure out, like, okay, because there are already set leaders that may be a generation ahead of us, that doesn't mean that we get to sit on the sidelines and just partake from their work and devotion and, you know, the commitment that they have to that church. What that means is, like, how can we join arms with you and maybe then bring things to the surface that they might not be aware of, that we can, you know, something we're passionate about, that we can say, hey, I really think the church needs to, like, help in this area. What can I do to help lead us in that? I don't know if that answers
I'm
the
going to come
question.
to Rachel too, because Rachel, I alluded to it before, but so you married Taylor and his dad was a pastor. And I know you guys have been involved right from the jump in being involved in church, but how has the generational differences affected or filtered the way you guys have engaged in your church?
Yeah. So just to clarify, I married a Taylor with a father who's a pastor who's not your son, Taylor.
That's right,
different
yes.
tall Taylor
Just
with a
to
pastor
clarify.
dad, but there are a lot of similarities. It's very funny. And my husband, Taylor, is the worship director at our church where his dad is an associate pastor. So that can be an interesting dynamic. It is a church with the demographic is pretty representative of the area we live, which is a lot of white people. And when we first started attending, there was a lot of older white people. So it kind of highlights that, that feeling of like, okay, there's us who are attending, and then there's the elders and deacons who are all middle-aged plus white men. And and okay, so what's the role here? And yeah, so I think it can be tricky to kind of find and navigate in kind of a big picture, what's our role, especially because Taylor is on staff. And then also, like, in a smaller sense, in our own family, because there's, you know, like, Taylor is on staff, his dad is on staff. And so dinners around the table can have some interesting discussions. I feel like Taylor also has a sister who's just similar to me. So sometimes there's times where we're both like kind of digging in a little bit and like poking and prodding and saying, okay, why do we do things this way? Or like, is there room for this to change? And I think sometimes there is that tension between generations of people who have kind of the power and the authority in the church, and then people who are younger and have those decisions, like they're not in the room where it happens, to borrow from Hamilton. Like, you have these decisions kind of set upon you, but you're not in the room where the decisions are made. I think that can be sometimes a place where there's younger people having a hard time feeling at home in a church, or leaving the church, or feeling like the things that they care about aren't well represented in the church, or maybe feeling like the church is antiquated and like there isn't a place for them, or it's this like it's this structure that is just kind of outdated. And yeah, so I think that it can lend it to that. But also, I think specifically our family has had the benefit of just wisdom from older people in our family through the generations. I mean, you were the pastor of our grandparents and our great grandmothers, and so we might have a little bit of a different perspective because we were close with a 102-year-old who loved the Lord and shared her wisdom with us.
Gigi was a inspiration to all of us. Let me go to Abby next. Abby, so you are in a different generation than Katie for sure. It gets muddied in the middle, a little bit in terms of where the line is. But can you identify differences in the way that Katie has approached her faith and the way you have had to, or is it kind of the same?
Like strictly in terms of just different generations?
Yeah. I mean, she doesn't seem like people who are in their 50s would look at all of you and go, they're all young,
right,
and lump you into young category. But I guess what I'm asking you is, I think there are even some differences. You started to talk about it in the beginning of growing up on social media and in a different way than Katie did, in her life. So, but has it made that much of a difference in your opinion? Is your generation different than Katie's, or kind of the same in your opinion?
This is my opinion, but I think it is different. And maybe this is just differences in personalities, but like, I know sometimes Katie will be like, what is this on Instagram? Or like, what is like, why is she posting so much on Instagram? And so it is this, and that might just be like a Katie to Abby type of thing, but like not a generalizing the generations. But I think I feel and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but like with social media, there is just such a pressure and such a comparison. Like it is just like so deeply knit. And this is literally just me, maybe, I don't know, but speaking for myself, like it is in like the deep pits of my stomach. When I see people post about their faith on social media, I'm like, oh my gosh, do I have to post about my faith on social media for me to like actually be out there? Like, you know what I mean? And it is just, I think it is different because I think it was just something that we grew up with, like I grew up with, and it was like, it feels like every, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, there's another app that comes out that it's like a different platform. And it's then the question, how are you going to present yourself on this platform? And like, how is your faith going to be portrayed on this platform? And I mean, and people in like the millennial generation, like they are on social media. Like you had to get an Instagram read like how long ago? A couple weeks ago. Right.
Yeah.
And so like, do I think it's weird that you're on Instagram? No, but like, it was almost like downloading those apps was just like a milestone in like, all right, there's the next app, so let's download it. Like it was just like assumed. And so I think there is a difference. I think now it seems like people across multiple generations are on social media, but I think like it's different because we just grew up with it, and like it was never this like, oh, we know what life is like without it, and then now we get to choose whether or not like this is a part of like our profile that we want to put out there. And with us, it's like, no, that is your profile. Like that is who you are. Like when people want to like Instagram stalk, like that's a thing. And like they look at your profile, but it's so, I think, manipulative because you have the ability to just paint yourself however you want it to. And so I think there is a difference.
Abby, that is really, and I believe you're right. We won't go into it today, but the cause and effect question is an interesting one there, right? Because I think every generation has a slightly different approach, posture towards faith based on the cultural and circumstantial things going on around them. So in one sense, the social media platforms have just highlighted differences that would have already been there. But in another sense, then they do cause some of the differences because they're the environment. Jules, you are getting ready to get married soon, and I know you guys have been looking for a church. And so tell me how generational, attachment or similarity played into what you guys are looking for in a church. You get the chance to start fresh. And so how do you think about that? Do you want a church of people that are all your age? Do you want a church? Tell me about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that I also felt really lucky in that I led worship at Crossroads for a while. And when I was on like part-time staff for Crossroads, there was definitely this realization that I had that there was staff members that spanned many, many years. And I loved that. And I felt like Crossroads really wanted to honor and value what I found important and wanted to be relevant, not for the sake of being young, but for the sake of expanding the kingdom, because that means preaching to all generations. And so when we were looking for churches, we definitely knew that we wanted to be in a place where there are people like us and different from us. I went to a church while I was in college, and it was extremely diverse, both in race and in generations. And I remember the first time I walked in, it was a bilingual service. And so we were singing half of our songs in Spanish as well. And I remember this feeling of like, this is what heaven's going to be like. Just like, I know that like, this is what it's going to be like, with just surrounded by people who are very different from me, but also who have one mind. And so I think we were looking, and we definitely felt that the Lord was calling us to the Baltimore area, which is funny for me because I grew up terrified of Baltimore my entire life, never wanting to live in a city. And then the first time we drove in, looking at that big Baltimore tower, I felt this extreme like wash of peace and this feeling of like, you're coming home, which was terrifying, but really beautiful all at the same time. And so we visited this church that rents out space in actually a wedding venue in Canton. So they're looking for a building now, but they don't have a building yet. They started in 2017. There was a planting team that came, and it was like about 15 people that came up. And so when we went there, I remember talking to the pastor that first time we visited, and we had come with my fiance's parents. And he was so excited because he was like, yes, people older than 35. And he was so excited because they definitely draw this millennial generation. A lot of people that attend this church are young professionals in the hospitals surrounding Baltimore and in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And so there's definitely there's only one generation really represented at this church. And that was something that we were kind of bummed about. I think that we have seen, just like in reading all of Paul's letters, just there's so much conversation about the family and just elders and what it's like to shepherd and disciple, and knowing that a lot of that wisdom transcends through generations. And so what we saw with this church that we've decided to go to is, yes, there's a community for us of people that are our age and that we can learn from their differences and race and experience as well, but there's a desire to grow in generational diversity. And I think that desire is what we were mainly looking for, and seeing that really play out in that every single time that I've visited that church, I've seen the pastors individually go out and find the people that are older, make relationships, make connections, because they really do value and desire to have older generations in the community. And it's hard because of the location is definitely, like, Canton is a very young, up and coming area of Baltimore that definitely has a younger population. And so it's interesting to me to see how that church is definitely going out and searching for people of older generations because they understand the value of that. So that's kind of how we decided.
Yeah. Katie, in your church right now, the idea that you have to package or present the truth never changes, right? Truth is truth, but the idea that you have to package it differently, is that part of how your church thinks about outreach and a new generation, or not at all? Because I think the gamut is pretty wide there in terms of how churches address that.
Sure. I mean, I think it would be foolish to not consider it at all. I mean, the truth, how, whether you like it or not, is that a lot of people get their information from social media, or that is how they connect, especially during the time we've been in recently. So I think obviously that plays a part in just considering how you're going to connect with people, how you're going to communicate information. It definitely has to be taken into consideration. The one thing that I feel like is interesting as far as issues of faith, or how people from different generations approach questions that they have of faith. And I think I can't speak really for older generations, but I at least think for ours, is that I feel that people are so quick to look at other people's opinions, or look at, an Instagram post or a blog or a podcast. And none of those things are inherently wrong or bad, but I just see a lack of biblical literacy for individual people to have a question of faith. And instead of Googling it, or looking up what their favorite author says about it, or looking up what their, someone on Instagram says about it, I wish that desire was let me open up the Bible and see what the Bible says about it. And so I think, obviously, trying to reach people through social media outlets, I think that churches have to be doing that. That is how people connect now. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
But I think we're doing people a disservice by maybe spoon feeding answers of faith instead of helping them read for themselves. And like you were talking about, Jules, finding out who is God? Who is the God of the Bible? What does the Bible say about this issue? And how can I read this and read some other things and kind of figure out, where I land. I think that is something, I don't know, again, I can't speak for older generations, but I feel for people my age, that's what I've noticed a lot is people looking to other people for their opinions on issues instead of going to the root, which is Scripture.
Yeah. Boy, there's a whole bunch to unpack there, but we only have time for one more question. So Rachel, you get the last question here. And I have to say this because when you were talking, Katie, I thought at some point, I don't know how far back you have to go, whether it's 200 years or something like that. The church was the source of truth. People turned to the church to find truth. And somewhere along the way, people stopped doing that, probably for a lot of different reasons. And so now you Google it, or you look for a YouTube video on it, and the church seems to be noticeably absent from speaking truth in those contexts, which is our last question, Ray, and this is an open-ended one too. It seems like that certainly in the millennial generation, that the trend has been towards not identifying with a religious preference. So you've probably heard this, that the people who check none, are the largest group in millennial, identification. What do you think that means? And what should that prompt from the faith community?
Oh, that's so interesting. I remember when I was giving birth to my youngest Abel, you can get out on your form in your, like when you're getting checked in, you can check on your paperwork if you have a religious preference. And I
Right.
remember even myself, not like I'm such a Christian, so like, why would I? But I hesitated because I thought, I don't want my nurses thinking I'm weird. Like, I don't want them sending a chaplain to my room. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And so if like I, who am a member of a church, like not afraid of identifying myself as a Christian, have that hesitation, I can imagine how other people who have felt really in real ways like ostracized from the church or having painful negative experiences with the church community. So like I'm not surprised that that there would be that inclination to not identify a specific way. I think that churches know that they have to meet people where they are. And so I think that can be interpreted as like, we need to Facebook page, or like, let's get on Instagram. But I think that while that is beneficial, because that is where millennials and, on down, that's where we're hanging out virtually, especially now that we can't hang out physically anywhere.
Yeah,
I think
right.
that the bigger question is like, okay, if you're not reaching people where they are on the things they care about, like the topics that they care about, the ways that they feel distance from a church community, like not what apps do you need to be on, but like what topics do you talking about in church on a Sunday morning, in your small groups, in your care group, what books do you need to be like reading, what so I think that is, I think I have like a adverse reaction when I'm listening to a sermon and the end is like, so if you're feeling anxious and you're on Instagram and you're comparing and you're like watching a sports game, and I'm like, don't tell me how to apply scripture. Like, that's not what I need from you to be relevant. I think millennials are looking for, I'm not like the token millennial, so it could be really different. But in conversations I've had with people who have previously identified as Christian and now don't, it's because they feel passionate about other issues and they feel like the church has made them choose. Like, do I stand with my LGBTQ friends, or am I do I identify as Christian? I don't feel like the church is allowing me to choose both. So if I choose one, it's going to be the people in front of me who are hurting. Or if I can't it could be with any issue, but I was just having a conversation with a friend about that one specifically. But I think it's, if you feel like someone is making you choose, if you feel like the church is making you choose between X and identifying as a Christian, you're not going to choose this label of Christianity instead of the people who are right in front of you. And I think that, I just think of like Jesus and the Pharisees. They spent so much time asking Jesus, like, the rules here. What can we do on the Sabbath? Here's this woman we caught in adultery, like all this stuff. And at time and time again, Jesus kept saying, like, you're missing the point. I'm going to talk about the things
require me right now.
Right. So
what's the next loving thing I can do?
Yes. And I don't think Jesus shied away from hard people. I don't think he shied away from hard topics. And so I think that it's easy for older generations to be like, oh, they're all like heads down their phones. All they care about is texting. And like, what's the new YouTube? When I think what millennials...
Do we talk like that too?
That's the jargon and the tone, of course. Yeah. You're all old-timey news reporters, all of you. No, but I think that maybe the misconception is that we're not reaching millennials because we don't know how to use social media, basically. Like, I think that's kind of what it boils down to. And I don't want to learn how to use social media, or I'm willing to, but then it's going to be all about that. And really, I think there's more like pain, and there's more meat, and there's more really like honest reckoning and engaging, not with the culture, but with people that millennials are probably looking for and are having a hard time finding. And that might be where that separation is coming from.
Well, thank you guys. At the end of every podcast, I want to give my friends a chance to ask me a question. I've been doing all the question asking, so I have time for a couple of questions. You can ask me anything. Abby, start with you.
Yes. My question is, maybe my sisters can help me in wording this correctly, but what is the perception in the church, I guess, of Generation Z? Like, because I think Rachel kind of touched on it a little bit of like, they're always stuck in their phones. They're always, heads down, like not socially aware, whatever. But like, I'm curious to know what, and this is just going to be, I guess, your opinion,
Yeah,
right? But
that's all I can give.
What, is the opinion of my generation and the youngest generation, I guess, not youngest, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the church and like how we are pursuing our faith.
Yeah. A great question, Abby. And I'm not sure, just like anything, that one answer can cover a gamut of different opinions. But I think in general, the first thing I would say is that, in my opinion, most people don't differentiate between millennials and Gen Z. They just think, you kids, there's that voice again, right? That's the way we do it. And so that's why I asked you that question. I think there is a difference between you and Katie, and somewhere in the middle, the line gets blurred. But so I think, number one, a failure to recognize that there's a difference in being in the millennial generation and then in Gen Z. And then secondly, I would say a reticence to offer leadership to people from your generation because of preconceived notions about how it went the last time we gave a 21-year-old some kind of leadership position. But the truth is that you're in a different generation and probably offer different challenges and different strengths than some of your sisters did in terms of their involvement in the church. So I don't know if that helps or not, but Katie, you got a question for me?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of two parts and kind of goes off of Abby's question a bit. But my questions would be just, what do you think that younger generations, like millennials or Generation Z, have to offer to the church? And then what advice would you give to younger generations of people who want to be a part of building healthy, gospel-centered churches?
Great question. Yeah. So what do they have to offer? Energy. First, I remember being 25 or 28, and when I wasn't chasing little kids around, I had a lot of energy. And beyond that, though, I think that there is a passion to make a difference that some people I'm right on the cusp of baby boomer and Gen X, probably more like Gen X than boomers. But I think that our generation is jaded and not sure that anything's actually ever going to change. We were the first generation that it wasn't just assume that you would do better than your parents' generation. And I think that in the millennial generation and in Gen Z, there is this is going to sound, people are going to push back on this. There is a grounded hopefulness of it's not just assumed that it's just going to keep getting better and better and better. But what I see is people in your generations saying, but that's up to me. we can make a difference. We can make it difference. I think that the recent racial tensions that have bubbled up again in our country is a pretty good case study on this, where I feel like it's your generation that's leading this, going like, well, this is not going to continue on our watch. I don't know what you guys did. I'm not sure why it didn't change more, but that's it. I have felt that even in the past, couple of months. And so that's what I think your generation has to offer, is this sort of grounded hopefulness of, if things are going to change, we're going to be a part of that. And what was the second part of your question? What advice would I give?
Yeah.
Yeah. It appears to me that in our culture, we don't do a great job of honoring differences on any level. One of the reasons I started this podcast was to be real and to have conversations with people who are different than me. And I think that that goes for age as well, that we don't do a great job of celebrating differences. We do a great job of pointing out differences and letting it divide us. And so I guess my advice would be to look for ways to celebrate differences and to move towards one another, even not trying to get rid of the differences. Like, don't try to make me literate in terms of I don't know, do I have to do a TikTok, sermon now? I'm not sure.
Please don't.
Yeah, please don't. Good. But celebrating the differences and allowing our generations to work together, to use strengths from each one. I said to somebody the other day, a room full of 25-year-olds has a lot of potential for good and for bad. Like, that thing can go off the rails quickly, and nobody raises a red flag to go, wait, we should slow down a little bit. So that's, I think, the advice I would give is look for ways to celebrate differences, not get rid of them, and then to move towards one another. And that would probably go for racial, cultural, socioeconomic, all of those things. So hopefully real conversations help that to happen. And here's my hope, is that somebody's going to hear this today, whether they're in my generation or one of yours, and they're going to go, I know somebody who needs to hear that conversation. And that will be helpful to them. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I can't wait to see you in person again, but until then, stay well and God bless.
Thanks, Reed.
Now, if you thought this conversation was valuable, definitely subscribe, because there's more just like this one on the way. Around here, we think it's crucial to provide a safe and judgment-free place for people with different perspectives to come together and to learn from one another. Thanks for keeping it real with Reed. I'll see you soon.